front. Heather, how are you? That's a true so good?
Yeah.
Or think so good?
Oh no, I got a research advice. Oh, hers is making everything better. Yeah, it does.
Dave, good to see you.
I just found out. This morning,
We're
doing great. So happy.
in my area. Well, further up. I can try, yes. Yes, I can try that for you, Dave. Maybe out there for you, for sure. So, you have a question? Yes.
So I've been looking at some of my missing assignments, and you haven't put in the mock trial yet in our grade, right?
Correct, I have not. Nope, nope.
Okay.
In fact, then you see the papers right here. They should be in, as promised, a week from when they were due. Probably,
Okay. I was
everything
looking-
will be in by Wednesday.
So I know I'm missing some notes, but I also looked and there's one about electoral college quiz.
Yeah, that was a paragraph summary of how it works.
Okay.
Right, that's all we needed.
Okay. I'll do
Yeah.
that.
So you can do that easy, and then, yeah, right, because I get it. Some kids are like, well, wait, I want to see how well I need to do on the last test for my grade.
Yeah.
But that depends on your mock trial, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. When is
Yeah,
our
yeah.
test?
Yeah, so you guys will see more than half of them on tomorrow, by tomorrow. But everything will be finished on Wednesday.
Are like the notes in the test? It's gonna be like graded like after?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Are we doing like notes up till Thursday?
So we're going to do notes up until Wednesday, and then the test on Thursday.
Oh.
Does that
Yeah.
does that make sense? Right?
I
Yeah.
thought we were testing Friday, so.
Yeah. No, I'm leaving Friday. Like we talked about before, you guys can. It's a low key day
I
Friday.
just realized.
Yeah. If anybody needs to make up the test or whatever, we can do that too.
I apparently forgot to turn in that.
Okay. Yes, I was wondering about that. We will take it. We will take it, Gabe. Okay.
And will the test be like online?
Like, you mean in terms? Yes, it is there. Like, if you are not in school and want to take it, yes. Yep.
I might be gone Thursday.
Yeah. So, follow, I believe, the Canvas date might have that actually. Follow the Canvas date. It could be the 13th. You know what I mean? So just follow that in terms of like when it releases, right? You have like the 1 day to turn it. And then just send it to me by email. I think that'd be the easier thing, I think. Just because I won't be looking for Canvas submissions unless we're in dismissal, which I don't think between now and then we will. Yeah, good question.
Did we get any other notes besides the national?
Are everything else this lovely note, this one page? Everything else. I did want to talk briefly. I mentioned this in a couple other classes, but you guys, yesterday there was like a state of emergency address from the governor at 9:30. Yeah, I think, Spencer, there are some consequences in that, but I did want to just, touch on it, being a government class. So there are 4 mandates. I think 2 of which are very normal for you guys. The other 2 are probably a little bit harder for you. But the idea of mandating mandating masks, that is, Alina, for people not in a school setting, something a little different, right? So some of your parents and colleagues might be exposed to having to wear masks in a way that they're not used to, right? So like Walmart, Lee's, whatever gas
Isn't there
stations.
like anyone who's like not having something like school or work, they're supposed to stay at home?
So that is going to be in a way, the second mandate that is similar to what we had in April. But the first one is masks for pretty much everybody, which isn't anything different for you guys, right? But for parents, it's like, especially if they're working in a cubicle or in an office, like it's an expectation now. And you'll see people, like if Heather goes into Walmart and is like, I'm just not going to wear it. Like, you're going to get hounded by more like Walmart employees. Be like, you got to put it on, you got to put it on. They can't physically like force you to put it on, but they're going to they're going to be
Let it be
a little
known.
more forceful, because if that business is caught not actually following through, then the Department of Labor for the state can actually give them a penalty and fine.
So is it not like an OSHA requirement or something?
It's not an OSHA one, but it's a Department of Labor requirement. So it's now has, remember we talked about a government is something that has teeth, right? It now has teeth, if that makes sense, in the state of Utah, for at least the next 2 weeks, if not longer for that, we'll see. But that's that first mandate, which could be, for some of you, normal. It's like, that's normal, right? But again, for people who are not in school, and I can't state this enough, for most states of the union, outside of school, nobody's doing jack, right? Like, does that make sense? I want that to, I know you guys sometimes think, oh, school, we're sort of back to normal. It is like the great privilege that school's sort of in session, because outside of Utah, not outside of anything, in the whole country, things aren't really happening, and I think you're aware of it, but sometimes there's sort of a mirage of school being in session. So that's the first mandate, and I will get to Amazing in a second. The second one that he mentioned was having the social gatherings. So that's the thing for the next 2 weeks, which some of you might look at inconsistencies, but it is real, of having 2 weeks non-social gatherings, period, only just within your immediate family. But that, of course, excludes businesses. Businesses can still be open, which might be...
What about protests? Because like I know there's some protesting during the Capitol. Does that mean they're not?
That means they will not be issued an actual an assembly certificate. They won't be issued that by the government. And if they're caught there, they will $10,000. Yep, for the next 2 weeks. So the social gatherings thing gave, even for protests in the next 2 months. Police, Libby's right, will have to enforce that. How they will is a big question, but $10,000 for any gatherings. Catastrophe 7 or like the Howl or whatever, like if anything like that were to happen. We mentioned in third hour, I think it was in third hour, that like Sadie's, right? Sadie's postponed. That is not associated with the school, but say those exec leaders or whoever was running it, whatever.
Moms, pretty much.
Some moms, right? So those moms, which would be so funny, in a way, if those moms were to actually host it in the next 2 weeks. And any reporting were to happen, police would go and like, we got them, boys. Like they wouldn't have to arrest those moms, but they'd have to fine them $10,000.
So like per person
Wait, in the next 2 weeks? Or
In the next 2 weeks. Now, beyond that, we'll see what happens. But in the next 2 weeks, because of the spike in numbers and the hospitals don't have rooms.
So what is a gathering?
So it doesn't matter, like any trade, that means literally in the next 2 weeks.
Like I go to my neighbor's house.
If you go to your neighbor's house and you have a Karen who lives right next to you, and they call the cops, you
10,000.
and or the owner of that house could face a $10,000 fine. Upwards of a $10,000, up to
Hopefully
$10,000
they don't go
fine.
too overboard with this, because
So-
like when I think of this, I'm thinking about like Hong Kong and how
Yes.
they use the coronavirus to like
That's fair,
for
like,
your own good.
yeah, of diminishing it. I think that's a fair comparison. I don't think any, especially in Utah, it's just not going to happen that way because the governor is so reticent to even mention it to begin with.
Because like other states already had mandatory lockdowns and stuff
Totally,
like that. Ours
and
were
we
more
just
like
have it right-
guidelines.
Guidelines,
Now
yes.
it's like more like strict, yeah. But
Yeah,
I
doubt it.
just super
For the 2-week
apprehensive.
thing, for sure. And they're trying to guide that line. So Trey, that's on paper what they could enforce, right? So if you got 5 friends over, 3 friends over, but it shouldn't in the next 2 weeks, even though your brain's breaking and thinking, I'm with 1,600 kids at school, that, the line is once 2 o'clock happens, no fraternization between people, you just disperse. Which leads to the third thing, and that is anybody here in winter sports? So 1, 2, 3, 4, and that includes extracurricular activities and so forth, but swimming, right, like, because you're on the swim team, right? Yeah, so like swimming practices canceled for the next 2 weeks, right? I mean, that's the hard thing. Wrestling too,
basketball tryouts.
right, so there it is. So that's the third thing for you guys to have to deal with is, that sucks for winter sports. They have to not do anything.
It's like bump in the road though. It's like you're supposed to have games like soon.
Right.
Within like 14 days
Yeah,
actually.
and they just sort of
Yeah.
bump it,
So
and
now it's like,
that third option is the one that affects you. The first two are really like, nah, the same. But that third option, it is hard for practices.
also I've heard that they will start testing the athletes.
Okay, so the fourth one is what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's
But-
testing
but the
weekly.
third- So Olivia, let me explain this. Guys,
I'm listening.
yeah, they are. But beyond that, winter sports. So guys, let me explain this. That's why I wanted to, and I think that can help explain some issues. But the third thing is, like suspension of any extracurricular activities. So heck, even for debate, they have to figure out like,
Debate kids don't even meet together though, it's all online.
I know, but here's the tricky part. Hosted tournaments are usually done for liability reasons here at the school. To where, does that make sense, Maisie, where kids will perform or at least be at the school?
But we're not in the same league.
I know, but Maisie, I'm trying to say, the state's trying to get some more guidelines for that. But Maisie, I think that they might shift it more online, like for the next 2 weeks, where like no practices, like stay at home and do your thing there. Does that make sense? Like, but this 2 weeks is what we're talking about. The fourth and final thing is what Olivia and Sarah. So guys, get out notes. We will get going. But that fourth and final thing is what will affect athletes, and that not only are they practicing doing testing on the state playoff schools, like so Skyview, right, for football is still in it, if I remember correctly, and Ridgeline.
Also, do they have to be tested?
So any of the playoff teams in football right now, whereas before Olivia, right, wasn't that sort of the
So
low
why are
key
they
thing?
letting them play?
So
Why are they letting them play and we can't hold tryouts? That is the most asinine thing I've ever heard.
we use the word asinine, but I will get to it. Tyler, there is a PR thing that they've said, but you guys can decipher BS or not. But guys, Olivia, I do want to answer first off for the current teams in playoffs, still for the fall sports, which I think football is the only one still in.
Yeah.
Meaning if anything, okay. They have said that while they're suspending the next 2 weeks of activities, they will allow intercollegiate things to happen because those respective conferences, Mountain West, Pac-12, have done their own protocols for testing, right? You guys have heard of those things. High school, as you guys know, the whole low-key thing, and Hunter, I promise I'll get to you, the whole low-key thing, isn't it been the whole message of like, don't get tested, don't get tested. Now, that's going to be moot because they will mandate for athletes, not just in the playoffs, the reason they're able to justify it. I don't know if you buy it, but
Yeah.
Like, what if they, because most of it, like, I bet one of us has it and we just don't know.
oh,
Or, like,
the viral
ours-
load, yeah, you're right.
So
And-
like, so the team, like, what if it just knocks out everyone? Are they just, what are they gonna do? So they can't-
hello, Tooele.
Forfeit, yeah.
Hello, or excuse me, hello,
Freshman.
Kearns. Hello, Tooele. Where like those teams get knocked out.
It'd be like the normal bad moment.
Honestly, it was
So-
just though with the
Ouch.
like,
But before we get to it, guys, I want to explain the reason they're able to PR it. They say, look, the winter sports, regardless, I guess I'll jump ahead. The winter sports, all health administrators, all state administrators, so including faculty here at the school, myself, we will all be, in theory, weekly tested from here on out until there's who knows when. That's not just the 2 weeks, but just going
You have to
forward.
do the nose ones?
We'll see.
no, it's like
I hope it's
So,
not.
so as teachers, like Olivia, those individuals will be tested, whereas like we haven't before, right? Right? Likewise, athletes in the playoffs now, they say we'll let them go, Tyler, because we need them to be our tests so that we can test our own testing protocol
So
for
why not do
sports.
it during tryouts or like while
Right.
there's not games? Like
Right.
why put games on the line
They-
to like
Yeah,
That's their PR spin, in
that's
essence.
the stupidest
but they're
PR
fi-
spin I've ever
No,
heard.
They're
watch
favoring.
Skyview get knocked out because one of the
So-
kids has COVID, and then
Yeah.
they get knocked out
So-
because they were a test subject, and then they don't get a win state.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's,
good. That's good.
and that's okay, guys.
That's so sad.
No, that
Like,
is
your
sad.
senior year, like,
Yeah.
it's sad.
Alright,
Like
so-
I hate Skyview, but I'm not gonna take away state.
Guys, stick with me.
You know what I mean?
I know. I love how the first two things, Trey, we're like, okay, but then we get to the third and fourth. It's like, ah, because
No,
that's
that
what
was
affects
me.
you guys.
I was laying down
The
on
third and fourth. So Olivia, the fourth mandate is increased testing. So staff members, state agencies,
Anyone in the
Um,
bubble.
right, will be tested. Who knows how regularly? Paige, it could be every week. It could be 2 weeks. Who knows how that's going to roll out?
I know for
Winter
college-
athletes. 1 second.
College is 3 times
Guys.
a week.
Winter athletes at the high school will be tested. So the idea of like don't get tested, that's out the window,
Yeah.
because that's going to be tested. And if you compare it again to college and pros, it's like not to that level, but like there is a brain of logic that makes sense of like, okay, I guess.
So why didn't they start doing this like 2 months ago?
Now, before I answer that one, hopefully at least the PR thing, which you might smell BS, that's how they spin that and saying, we're gonna focus on testing. We'll let them go because we can sort of test them and how that goes. And then in 2 weeks, winter sports will be going in theory, and those in wrestling gear, whatever, swim, Esther, teachers, we will be exposed to some type of testing going forward for the foreseeable future until we have the vaccine. Those are the 4 mandates that we've seen, 2 of which I think you guys are pretty, the last 2 are sort of like, oh, that's a little different. I do want to say before I get to your questions, I feel so bad for the winter sports and especially the spring sports. I just have to be completely honest with you. Because the optics don't look good where it's like, did we literally just come back to school just for fall sports? Like there is a vibe of that of like, is that what happened? I know it's not the real case, but there is a little bit of optics for this winter and spring sports I feel bad for. I do feel bad for. Olivia, someone who's asking about the 25% thing is still in line in terms of capacity for spectators. That's still in line even after the 2 weeks. So somebody's asking in the third hour, like, are they going to shut down spectating? No, but it is limited to 25%. And Maisie, in 2 weeks, I could see them doing that. I could see them carving out a line that way. Okay, so we had several comments and questions. Hunter did have his hand up. Wait, Hunter, let's go. Let's go in order. Okay, Hunter.
How can they justify closing down everything and then letting kids go to school? That don't make sense.
Yeah.
That's so
Well,
confusing.
because
what the heck?
one is jobs. We need to because if they shut down everything, because I've always thought if we're gonna do shut down everything for a month. If everyone just stayed diligent, then we could get rid of it. But then I also realized everyone's mad at Biden raising taxes, but we have to because we're getting people who are losing jobs to go with money.
It's a good connection of the irony is that to pay for more of the testing, we have to use these state emergency funds, which are based on taxpayer bills. There's that irony, Talia, of okay, we're sort of closing things are having a negative effect, but we're also having to pull from money that way.
But how can they justify it?
So I'll get to your question in 1 second.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Have you seen him lately?
I have yes, I have. He's been pretty, no, he's actually been relatively good in terms of attendance. He's had some days here and there, but yes, no.
I'm hoping to catch him. He wasn't in 14.
He has been in 5th hour pretty consistently.
Okay,
At that
so if I
break-
have to.
Yeah, Amy, yeah. He has
The other
been
one hasn't for a
probably
while.
8 out of 10 times he's here.
Okay,
He
so
is.
if I
And
have to, I'll come back upstairs.
you got it.
Why can't we just be like Sweden?
Thank you, Amy. Okay, so Hunter,
Yes.
let me get back to what you're saying. You're saying, I want to understand this. And Talia, there is some truth. I don't know if that's answering completely what Hunter's saying, but the truth is there is a severe irony of increased number of COVID cases, which has been predicted in terms of its flu season, right? People are going to go in and I think anybody logically can sort of piece that together. Are things overblown? Let's go in that way.
We'll be scared again though. We can't.
Yeah.
We'll go back to March.
Flu season is real, the numbers are there, hospitals have to deal with it, it's a problem. That's why Governor Herbert sort of came out with and said we got to sort of stem the tide, if you will. With that said, Talia is right though that as things are not totally shut down, but social gatherings, which could put a deterring effect on the economy, the irony is you're having smaller tax base, but you're having to increase tax funds to pay for more testing. Does that make sense? You're right. That's a very ironic thing. That stinks, but that's sort of what the state's going to have to do. Hunter, your question about how can they justify, if I understand, going to school when other things are shut down, is that correct?
Yeah, because school.
They can regulate
more.
Yeah. There is,
social gatherings.
correct. Hunter, and I like that idea. You guys remember how we talked about the line in the sand, sort of drew that line? This thing is now becoming a very sort of squiggly line. And they're, because your brain looks at the inconsistency of, wait, church gatherings, 150 or so can happen, but not me and my buddy going to Lucas's house for the next 2 weeks.
What's the cap though?
So
What do you put on?
there's, for the next 2 weeks, it is only your immediate family.
So
what about church? Is it because they said church was okay?
Yeah, but church is okay, businesses are okay.
Is it because we're the silent?
So why wouldn't I just go
Businesses
to
are
Walmart?
open. So gyms can be
I
open.
am so
I'm going to
excited.
Walmart with my friends and we're going to shop.
Correct, but in
So that's
theory,
not social
Sarah,
gathering because I'm supporting
using that
business.
analogy, in theory, if you go to Walmart and then you go hang out in a parking lot together, all
And I'm
holding
hanging out at Walmart
hands,
for the next 2 weeks.
then cops could be called to
Hey,
disperse.
toilet paper cords are
You
coming
can call the
back.
cops if you're like in the car with another.
Because
Oh wait, there's no toilet paper.
so Hunter, that's their weird line of separation, and you're like, that
I'm
doesn't
going to jail now.
add up.
But they're all
But
joined
Hunter,
together.
it really relies on somebody else calling you on it, and also the cop who, if they were to come, would be like, all right, scram, and wouldn't do
They're
anything.
not gonna like arrest you.
Right?
We live in Utah.
Unless it's
So Hunter, does that make a little, Hunter, does that make a little more sense? Okay,
I guess.
Maisie had it from the beginning. Maisie,
I'm
shh.
just trying to say, it's our age group, there's that Halloween party that was used, we are the reason they have to do this. We cannot be mad, we're the ones that made it happen. We cannot be mad.
Whoa. I.
And no one works.
So Maisie has put the claim out there,
Okay,
and
but look around. All of us are wearing masks right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
no, that is so
wearing
BS.
them correctly though.
the Bear River Health Department,
Everyone puts it under
Maisie-
their nose. That's not helping.
Maisie, the Bear River Health Department did come out, and one of their big claims was that concern of there's a Catastrophe 7 party, there was those parties. There's a correlation. We don't know. So Maisie, they put that claim out that that happened and then spike in numbers. They're saying there's at least correlation between the two. They also have acknowledged that it's flu season, so even if those parties weren't happening, for instance, right? Because of just the propensity for people that, and Bear River Health Department would agree with you. Bear River Health Department would agree with you. I want to go Sarah. I'm trying to go in order.
This is just like a mini comment, but I feel like if they decide to test the student athletes, which they have,
They will.
It's
That's not
like
if. They're
it's
going
just
to.
a-
And
But I
And
feel like-
Olivia, they get to do it because it's actually less intrusive than this. For you to attend almost any public school in the state of Utah and almost any public school in the state, of any state, you have to prove vaccination, you have to prove actual vaccine card to actually get in. If you don't, you won't get full access for the school. So that precedent has already been set. I'm not saying I agree with that, but you guys get where they're saying like that bar has already been reached. This is here, so we obviously can do it. Olivia, I mean, I'm just letting you know, like, that's their response to it.
Yeah.
Sarah, keep going.
With the whole testing thing, I feel like a lot of student athletes like have chosen not to get tested because that's what they like. Not
Right,
that, not
right.
it's like a thing you have to do, but that's just what they've chosen.
Right.
And I feel like because they're testing everyone, our school faces a lot bigger of a possibility of being shut down for 2 weeks because 15 cases and you're done.
And as
I
you
feel
guys
like-
know, the 2-week shutdown does, like Roy High or Kearns or Corner Canyon, after the 2 weeks, it's like they're not really coming back.
Yeah.
It's like hybrid, if
Wait,
that.
oh
Yeah,
my
so that's where it's like you get tested, and the student athletes are the ones that like are most exposed. Not most exposed,
Yeah,
but they're
yeah,
getting
yeah,
extra
yeah,
exposure.
yeah.
And if you test when they test you, like, and you get 3 people that test positive on this team, well, first of all, the team shuts down. Then
Right.
they test everyone else. Then there's
Right.
15 cases in the school, and then the school shuts down.
And that's a good comment you made there. That's a good comment.
So are they just gonna? Oh.
Of like potentially, right? I mean, I think, and Olivia brings the point of the viral load that any of us have at any point is questionable. Like that, we could barely have it, right? But just
I
we
just
have
like
it.
winter sports, like with the postponement.
feel
Like we
bad,
all thought
man.
it was a winter. We all thought it was a postponement in March, and now it's like, it just feels too much the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah,
that
that's
I'm
fair.
Freaking out.
That's fair. I can see that concern.
What?
I can see that for sure.
Here,
Uh,
please, I'm
I-
next.
I think you were okay, Tyler. Yeah.
Okay, so do you think, like, because like Sarah was saying, this feels like really familiar to
That's
when
fair.
it was March.
That's a fair
Like,
comparison.
I don't think people will let it happen.
So, well, we have no power over it. If it was up to us, we wouldn't be putting it on postponement now.
I see what you're saying, that the 15 for our particular school, Maisie, if that were to happen, when we come back after 2 weeks, the community push to have more in-person than off would be pretty harsh.
And
So-
they're saying like he's going to like make like little things. Like he's saying if they say we can have have 10 people, we'll have practices with 10 people at various.
Yeah.
Like, they're gonna.
I see what you're saying, that the community push would not allow it to be like March again, and I think
Wait.
there's some truth to that. Keep going.
Okay, so the 2-week intro, A, it's sounding vaguely familiar. B,
Yeah.
do you think he's using it saying, we tried to do it? Maybe he's foreshadowing a cancellation, saying, look, we tried and the case number still went up. So, like, there's nothing we can do because that's what happened back in March.
Yeah.
B,
Yeah.
if testing goes up, no matter what, cases
Yeah.
are going to go up.
Yeah, that's
right?
just the thing. Like,
Right.
they think they're gonna test everyone, and oh my gosh, there's so many more cases. No, people are just getting tested more. Like, that's the thing. It's like,
Okay.
aren't,
And the good news is the mortality rate has actually decreased because
more people have gotten
right.
tested.
I
more
just
people
want to make
have
sure
it,
that's
less
clear.
people are
Right.
dying.
You're onto something there. Tyler.
Okay, C,
Okay.
mental. It's a big thing nobody's talking about. Like, the mental
Yeah.
side of this pandemic has taken a huge
That's
toll
so
on
fast.
people.
Resiliency that we talked about in the third
Right.
hour.
And
I
so,
gave
like-
credit. That's what I'm
And you know
talking
what?
about.
Like,
You guys are
honestly,
resilient.
like, I would say, like, before this entire thing, like, okay, for the first 2 week shutdown, like, I was like, okay, 2 weeks, like,
Yeah.
I'll stay consistent, like,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna be back in school.
Yeah.
So how do they expect us to stay so positive and so upbeat when we just think it's gonna happen again? And then the last thing is, are they gonna make like an athlete bubble per se, like where they
Right.
just make all the athletes go on one?
You know, you were talking about Macy.
Oh, I hate this.
So
I'm
guys,
so pissed.
in general for A through C, thank you, Hunter. For A through C,
Oh, here's
you're on to something, Hunter. You're on to something, Tyler. The A through C, it's a PR spin. There's questionable comparisons and parallels, and it's like, this is not looking good, and it could very well indeed turn into, for many schools in the state, right, a 2-week
Yeah, it's not just us.
thing.
or shut down.
But I
for
do
good.
think Macy brings up the point that the final school dismissal thing, even in a lame duck governor, which is what Herbert is right now, I will be shocked if he dies on the sword and says that we are fully dismissed, okay? That could be a weird hybrid situation, which does include your last point about a bubble for athletes. I could, because of the politics within the state, like, I could see people
Like, move all
pushing
the
so
athletes.
far to be like, we're just gonna somehow, I don't know what that would mean of,
If they would have started this trying team long time ago, it would have eliminated so much
So-
problems.
but I will say, if they're to do even just only a region-only thing or something, and like state doesn't do state, like I could, yeah, I could see that because of the public pushback of having like no school, like I think within Utah especially,
But like mentally, like why isn't the school and the state provide like?
Yeah.
And you know what? I
Yeah.
haven't like looked into or like researched.
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
but like if they're gonna provide like mental services, it'd be something like on social media, like
Yeah.
Safe UT. So
Yeah.
why aren't they like doing something to
That's it.
change the? You know what I mean? Like
with this being broached, it brings up a good point, and taxpayer, like Talia was saying, of expenditures, it could, that's the irony, right? As things close down, you need to have more access and resources. Why don't they? I think now they should be discussing it more than they have. You're right. I'll tell you,
Because people dying, they value more than people who want to kill themselves.
the triage thing, yes, but there is potentially a concern right now of it being now second time around and we're scared. Yeah, of not scared, but just emotionally that drain. That's fair. Athlete bubble, maybe they should.
because there are like a lot of people who mentally like look forward to
Yeah.
their sport.
Yeah.
So like people are gonna be done.
I feel for the spring sports especially, for sure. Good. A through C, understood. D, they should do more mental health things right now. Very good points. Livy.
I just believe that if we can do what the governor says for 2 weeks, if we can not be like selfish teenagers and just stay home, I believe things will get better.
Yeah, and I have to
really
tell you
believe
guys,
they will.
Livy, I think you're right on. I have not been, and I'll put this recording's going on regardless. I've been impressed that the students, I thought you guys would sabotage yourselves. I really did. I thought you guys would like shoot yourselves in the foot beginning of the year and not let this whole thing happen. That's not been the case. Ironically, it's been more of the adults. I think more of the adults who've been
The parents
more,
who let their kids do it, I think is also part of it.
sorry, say that one more time.
There's so many adults that aren't being responsible.
Right, yeah. So Livia, I would agree that I think if you can as individuals, by and large, no much social, not social stuff, but just keep doing what you're doing. You know, keep trying to get better that
Our
way.
economy's still open and like
It's the adults,
still
yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
It's just we just need to stay home and do
And that would give a lot better chance for whether it's a bubble, whether, whatever, even if we're in a school.
We just should all like
dismissal,
walk around in those.
when we come
giant
back, it'll be
bubbles,
better
you know
if we do what the governor's saying.
Yes.
That's fair. No, he just needs nope, it's not gonna give it to you.
Okay, fair.
Okay, Dr. Newton,
Ellie has her hand up.
Yes.
Ellie.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think, honestly, like, we have to take this all into consideration. They haven't closed down the schools.
Yep, thankfully.
All they're really requiring is a mask mandate, which I know a lot of people are anti-mask, but honestly, scientifically proven it has stopped the spread of the virus.
Yeah.
And if we could just do that, it would be maybe taking 2 steps backward, maybe so we can take another step forward.
That's a good way to say it.
And I mean, like, I don't really see this pandemic going away with people not cooperating and not. No one knows what to do, but I think the governor is just kind of saying this so that we can all.
I think you all can agree that the governor, you guys were saying earlier, the governor could have done this earlier, right? But he's like, I've gotten to the point where like we have to do it now. We have to do that now, and yeah.
And there are some things that I just think are just not necessary. I think school is super necessary, and I think shutting down the school would be so. And sports as well. Like my brother's a basketball player.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
And I think like dances and the Halloween party, which I heard you guys are talking about, that just isn't necessary. And
Yeah.
that we can cut out that have
Yeah.
school, which is huge.
That's after hearing it last night. The main thing I'm like, can we get some adults on board with this, right? Because if we do, then I think we'll be okay. Like I think we'll prove it enough to where we can be okay. That's my thought. If the adults can be there, fair point. Sammy.
Well, like the vaccine just got announced. Like
The Pfizer had 90% success rate right now with it. That's right. That's right. So that's like, come on, vaccine.
But they like awaited a sec too.
Well, they had some. They did have some on the front burner, but then there were some adverse side effects on 2 of them. So they had to go with a different one. I don't know if it's illegitimate, but that's what happened, if that makes sense. Like they
What are
did.
side effects?
So that
dying.
means like one guy did.
Boom.
But they couldn't say like if it was comorbidity. But it means that the symptoms of the side effects of the actual drug were just as bad as COVID.
So they're wondering what killed him.
So
COVID or
right.
medicine
So
Well,
yes, Sammy.
COVID, so.
I think Livy's right. Ellie's right. If we just do what we're doing here, and hopefully that vaccine comes soon, then like we can bide our time.
Do you think really after they distribute the vaccine, I mean, it's probably not gonna happen until like March,
Yeah.
best case scenario,
Yeah.
but do you think after they like distribute it that like masks will like go away? 'Cause
I think
don't
they'll be
really see,
phasing
like,
in and
masks,
out.
like, just-
But Ellie's right. The question is how will people be compliant with the vaccine?
So I know, didn't Johnson & Johnson?
Sammy, do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying?
What if you already had it? Do you need the vaccine still?
Traditionally,
Isn't that
yeah.
the same thing?
Because they've shown that even after.
So wait, how does the vaccine work then? Because isn't a vaccine like they put a little bit of the virus into you?
It could be a different seasonal one like flu vaccine.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, which we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Last 2 comments. Let's go, Nicole. Yes.
Okay, I have like a couple things, but all student athletes are gonna get tested for sure. So,
Winter, yeah.
with like what Livy and Ellie said, like I feel like people just can't be selfish, you know, because even my brother, he didn't want to get tested because like it gets him, you know,
Right.
like you get kicked out of school, like
Right.
you're just stuck at home, and then he ended up being positive. Like
Yeah.
you can't just, like a lot of people are selfish and don't want to get tested even though they're pretty sure that they have the virus, and it just ends up spreading it more. And that's
Yeah.
why I feel like
Yeah.
dances and like parties, like that's so stupid and unnecessary. Like, yeah, I guess that we're teenagers and stuff, but there's more to life than high school. And like it sucks for like people in sports and stuff, but like, we just can't be selfish right now.
Yeah.
We want it to go away, then for sure.
I would like, and also you don't know who like lives. Like some people live with their grandparents.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say
Yeah.
like natural selection, like survival
Right.
of
Yeah.
the
No.
fittest.
Yeah.
Which like I can understand because it's annoying.
Right.
Like I'll be honest, like it sucks missing
Yeah.
out on things.
Yep.
but also like my cousin has really bad asthma, and her sister brought it home from a big party, and like
Oof.
it was like she was in the hospital for over a month, like extremely bad.
Rough.
But like her sister just wanted to have fun because she's a teenager and
Right.
she didn't think it through. But you have to realize you don't know who lives with you in that situation. And
So let me say this. I'll say this, and we'll have Gabe, and we'll get into the supply side economics. I do believe. I told us to heck some of the debaters end of last year. I think everybody can agree, and if we can remember this, if we can stay in session more or less as a school by the end of the year, so Memorial Day, whatever. And if we have to compromise other things to have that happen, I want you guys as seniors, I'll be blunt, to have a way better year than last year. I'm just being
A way better spring.
Spring, I'd rather have spring canceled than my whole year wear masks and like other.
Think about that in terms of the seasonal element for graduation. Olivia, I would, even though graduation would be weird and different,
So I heard that
but
graduation.
Olivia, I would say, as the geezer that I am, those memories will never be gotten for last year.
But like,
Never.
but the thing is like they got to like do football season normal. They got to do like
Yeah.
all their sports normal. Like
And now they're just
basketball
like
season.
with graduations.
Yeah,
Well, Olivia and Sarah, I just want to be clear. What I'm trying to say is, if we can do our part, as Livy's mentioning and Ellie's mentioning and Nicole, if we can do our part to salvage a school year in which you can, Spencer, successfully go to school more or less and still stay in school at dismissal. I understand some kids are like, I want to get out. I'm good. The fact of finishing that year, I think there's some emotional attachment to it that's very important. And that's why I say if we can do that, if I got to dress up like in a chicken suit every day between now and the end of the year, I will do it if it means more likelihood of you guys as seniors actually finishing out your school year.
What would the chicken soup do?
I don't know.
Big sacrifice, humiliating.
Olivia, I mean, I can see, do you get what I'm saying that in terms of we
Okay,
can
so-
sacrifice that? Gabe, last thing.
So I know that besides Cypher, right?
Pfizer.
Johnson & Johnson also had problems with their vaccines, and multiple other companies that were developing. I didn't know that China, they reported that there was no ill side effects, which was kind of odd because multiple other companies that were making vaccines had problems concerning side effects that can affect someone. And so they said, China, their companies said that they didn't have any side effects, so they already started putting vaccines in people.
Right.
So I'm wondering, because there's already presidents that China's stuff that they sent, the masks and stuff, weren't exactly the most effective. Same thing as their testing kits. I'm just wondering, if they ever
International response.
if they ever make a vaccine, do you think it's trustworthy?
We wouldn't use it. Our FDA would not approve one made in China, most likely. But our FDA is pretty stringent, as Heather's already commented on from our model of Congress thing. Our FDA is almost too stringent in a way. So no, I don't believe that they would be supporting or
What about
approving
the
of a
world,
China vaccine.
internationally?
Internationally, I believe the same thing. Western democracies would not be going, Russia might jump in with China maybe, right?
Well, I'm just saying, would they be more hesitant because, they sent masks that were
They
faulty
would,
and
they would,
testing
against
that
China.
worked.
They would. Okay, let's get to supply side economics. I'll get to you after. Quick,
It's a yes or no question.
Yes or no? Okay, so if you said something last night that's not in his official mandate, does it still apply?
Like what?
I don't
'Cause
know.
doesn't say
It does.
$10,000.
Nothing about any fines. No $10,000.
It did. It said that in
It said
the.
$1,000.
It said $10,000 in the.
The page,
Oh, no, in the press conference, but not in
the press release, so any of the above can count for it. That's a good question of whether it's just given in a press statement, because he could have done that in a press statement and been like, I'm taking a nap, see ya. Does that make sense? He doesn't have to actually have I mean, he could have just released it, right? He could come out with one today and be like, we're taking it all back. He could.
And he would do that in a press release, though, because he
Run
wouldn't
away,
want.
Yeah, okay. Hope that answers your question. Awesome. Supply side economics. We've got two things to write down here. We talked about economics, that capitalism can be done with supply versus demand. There's some good and bad with that. Sometimes the product, even if you limit the supply, it's not going to be like, I want it, because it just sucks, right? Likewise, you could have another pro and con system called supply side economics. All right, for 10 points, ladies and gentlemen, does anybody know? I'll give you 10 points for either the pejorative term, like people make fun of it, or for another like complimentary term on supply side economics. For 10 points, does anybody know the other terms for supply side economics? As Sammy's looking it up madly. Does anybody know?
Wait, are these all forms of capitalism?
These are all forms of capitalism. You won't see this in socialism or communism. Nope. The question, Sophie, is capitalism, how far are we shifting over here, right? But still under the umbrella term of capitalism.
Correct.
Sammy?
Is it by like lowering taxes and regulations?
Well, that's the definition, but I'm looking for like another synonym, like what else it's called. Yeah.
Is it Reaganomics?
Reaganomics.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Trickle down policy?
All right, I will give you 12 points because you got the one and you got the other. Okay, I'm not going to give you 20, but 12 points, guys. Let's write this down. Supply side economics, which is also called Reaganomics. Supply side economics.
Like Ronald Reagan?
Yes.
Because he had like low taxes and he also like
Exactly.
wanted the
So
government to
supply,
step out
you
of
got
and
it.
that's why he was
Supply side economics, which is also called Reaganomics, and the term, it's like Reagan.
How do you spell Reagan though? Or is it R-E-A?
Heather, how do you spell your sister's name?
R-E-G-A-N.
There you go. Somewhere Reagan is out there saying, they're saying my name. And spelling it correctly. Because she was named, if I remember correctly, right? She was named after Reagan. So, not Regan.
Oh, yeah.
Reagan. Reaganomics. So supply side economics, which is also called Reaganomics, or trickle-down economics, just like Libby said. So supply side economics, which is also called Reaganomics or trickle-down economics, was started by President Reagan. Yes, was started by President Reagan in the, let's see if we get our decades correct. Well, what? Yes, in the 80s. Very good, guys. So supply side economics, which is also called Reaganomics or trickle-down economics, was started by President Reagan in the 80s. Oh, yeah, right here. We're under supply side economics, right there. Okay, so started by President Reagan in the 80s. And Sammy, you were correctly defining it. For some more points, tell me, what was that definition again?
You're lowering taxes, decreasing regulations.
Yep. So let's keep writing in the same point. It cut taxes on the producers. It cut taxes on the producers. So that, and we'll stop there. It cut taxes on the producers so that, we mentioned this at the very end of class, I think, Maddie, the idea of what is a healthy economy again? After my heart was broken. You got it, right? So how can we, Lucas, plan and manage this where we don't want to have it all happen like 1 year, where like all the producers sell all their product to consumers right away, because then 2 years later you're screwed, right? You want to have it like a healthy flow, like drip feed, to where the consumers are getting it and the producers can do it. You want to have a healthy balance. So one option of doing this isn't just supply versus demand, but it's supply side, where you cut taxes, and you can deregulate, but we'll just focus on taxes. You cut taxes on the producers. So the people who in theory have money and have businesses, and Reagan with a couple of his economic aides said, we got to do this idea, this is a pretty good one, because in the 70s our economy sucked, it was horrible. We had 1979 Iranian crisis, oil was 5 times comparatively as what it is now per gallon. You had to go and ration lines. That's not a healthy economy at all. Our economy sucked. And in 1980, when President Reagan was elected, he came into office and he's like, I'm going to do something different. I know FDR did a different plan, and we'll get to in a second. I'm going to do something really drastically different. I'm not going to cut taxes on the poor. I'm going to cut taxes again on what? On who?
The rich.
The rich. That's like revolutionary. He cuts taxes on the producers. What's the reasoning behind this? This on paper, you're like, I don't, what?
They haven't hired it's a cheap product.
Ooh, okay. You're focused on the supply here. Yes, Sarah?
It's to incentivize people to become producers, and then once they become producers to max
expand.
out
How many they can.
It's
That's
all
why, like,
in service to
the
this. It's
higher-
all, if you have cheaper product, like meaning it's easier for you to produce product, right? Like you can have more efficient machines, and then you get
and then you sell it
more
for
people in
cheaper,
there.
And then less people, you don't have to buy a gallon milk for $3, you can buy it for
Exactly.
$4.
It's expansion. You can expand and get more and more. So we wrote down here that created by President Reagan in the 80s, it cut taxes on the producers so that they could create new jobs. It cut taxes on the producers so that it could create new jobs. It sounds weird, right? We're like, the rich keep getting richer. Like if you hear that before, that's the ding, I guess you could say, on Reaganomics. But for the 80s, ladies and gentlemen, it worked. It absolutely worked. From 1980 to 1988, we had unprecedented economic growth.
Why didn't it stay?
And we'll get to it in a second, because there are some flaws with it, right? But if any of your parents, this is one of the reasons why Utah is a big supporter, because back in the day, Utah was actually mainly Democrat, okay? Because they felt the need to help others was charitable and therefore more Christ-like, okay? They very much were. Most of Utah was Democrat. But in the 80s, Reagan won so many Utahns over because they saw their economic livelihoods get better, by and large. Because producers now had more money, and they said, hey, I've got more of a profit margin, so one thing, Lucas, is I can make products more cheaply, and therefore I can open up another branch, I can hire more employees, and isn't that a healthy flow of producers' products to consumers? Because now you have people who are employed, they have money, it's the Henry Ford model. I can then earn money, right, you guys talk about this in A-Push, to then buy something, right? Right, because you have more producers involved, you have more competition.
More for less, so they can charge less.
It incentivizes, I can do my own thing, let's do this. If Hunter, your dad, always had the dream of starting his own, I don't know, Scentsy candle shop.
Heck yeah, dude.
And he's like, let's do it. And he sets it up. In a Reaganomics model, he actually would be able to keep a lot of his profit margin and expand and hire new employees. Anybody here have family members who own their own business? Okay, so, and I want to go back to Maisie. I know you're saying your boyfriend Badger, right? Right? That's an example, and it could be a side business, whatever. Like, Reaganomics is usually very advantageous for producers because they have more capital, right? They don't have to pay as much in payroll tax. For those of you who raise your hands, the reality is a lot of people think those who are producers have, like, they're rolling in money. No. Your profit margin is barely there. Maybe 3-4 decades later, you might have a profit margin that goes, whoop, like maybe, but for most of the time, you're not earning money.
And it's always steady.
Steady.
And even then, you're
Yep.
barely making more. I've learned all this stuff.
You know, I mean, as a producer, it is very difficult. There is an assumption, a myth.
Even like buildings, keeping buildings
Yep.
open costs so much. Heating.
Payroll taxes, overhead, insurance, liability. Garrett, I think you were saying you had a family member in the field of medicine, right? Yes, I mean, don't even start on liability insurance, right? It's astronomical, so the profit margin is way small. So Reaganomics was very advantageous. So like, sweet, this sort of, we had what's called stagflation, inflation and stagnated economic growth from the Carter era. It was bad. And so Sophia was like, sweet, this is great, the 80s were awesome. It has some downsides, which we'll get to, Sarah. Sammy.
Did this like kind of establish a middle class?
This, I would dare say that the Industrial Revolution in general established a middle class in Western countries, right? Because then you had people who weren't like uber rich, but you had people who weren't like dirt subsistence farmers. So you had people living in cities who earned like a decent wage, right? But for the U.S., the glamour of the 80s, I'm not saying watch Stranger Things, but you guys stick with me here. Like the excess of the 80s, right? Of like the crazy, the biggest hair you could imagine, the craziest vibrant colors you could imagine. It was all based on, Sammy, the economic success that the middle class was having, right? That the middle class was. It wasn't just the super 1%ers getting richer, which they benefited. But you're talking like big hats, big hair, big other things. It was the decade of excess because it was doing really, really well, right? Gabe.
So So I was wondering, like, you know how, like, well, I know one of the arguments for like the increase of minimum wage would affect the producers.
Correct.
Would that?
Correct.
Because that means they can't hire more and stuff like that.
He used the word asinine before on the other policies. Many producers, when they see raising minimum wage, are like, that is asinine. Like, what are you talking about? Because then their profit margins are cut even more. And then what happens is they'll get paid the $15, but many producers in middle income jobs will say, okay, we'll hold you, we'll keep you hired, but we're cutting your hours from 40 to 25. Right? I mean, so
And then they are less.
those are
Well, they're making it
the
so, like,
problems.
it'll be
But-
harder for like a high schooler to get a job because
Well,
an adult can, like they would rather hire an adult than a high schooler.
right. Then there are some effects, but without getting in the weeds too much on wage inflation, producers do matter on that. Sam, you had your hand up from before.
I already said it, the middle class.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, you're right on. Yes, it's such a good comment. I wanted to come back to you. Yes. Maisie.
So when minimum wage was introduced, it was like supposed to be enough to sustain yourself. Now you definitely can't. You cannot live.
Yeah.
How did that not go up with inflation?
So we're going to get to it with Keynesian economics, which deals with FDR. Okay, we're going to get to that because it started back then of having a livable wage, right? Where it was sort of a middle class thing, maybe lower.
In a country like this.
Yeah, like that was the intention. But when so many entry level jobs are there, our economy has shifted. It's changed. So you're saying why hasn't it kept up with inflation? I'll tell you this. The main reason is our country is no longer what we were in 1932. Meaning, our country is built off of what Garrett, is it your dad, your mom? I'm just curious. Your dad. Our country is built off of what Garrett's dad does, which is a service sector economy. He is, in this case, I'm assuming physician, physical therapist, doctor. ER doctor. Our country is built off of that model where we want to incentivize, like, don't stay at a McDonald's job, don't stay at an entry-level wood refinisher. You need to move up and get into the service sector because that's what our economy is built on. That's probably one of the reasons why we didn't want to keep up with inflation, because we're like, we don't want to be that way. We think that that's a better economy is to be more service sector,
It
which,
would destroy our economy.
yeah. But then there's something you said of like, we need to make crap too. Unlike now, we're trying to make stuff,
And instead of going from 7 to 25, like I don't think we should jump 5 to 15. I think
Yeah.
that would destroy so much.
Yeah.
But I think like maybe like a nice like 10 or 11.
I think there's something said on
I
that.
feel like that's like a happy medium.
To reinvigorate manufacturing, there's something said on that, right? Even if we're trying to beat Garrett's dad, we need to have a little bit more on that. Sammy.
Well, if we raise the minimum wage, would that make it harder for businesses to start?
Generally
Because,
speaking,
like,
it will.
I was
Even
thinking of
start.
going into business, but like now I'm kind of scared.
Yeah.
Is Utah even considering it? Because I know like other states are more
Yeah.
states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many states have, many states have passed it, and they've said, this is the weird thing, they've kicked the can down the road a living, they said, we're going to implement this in 2024,
Oh really?
by 2032. To
Hey,
try,
we did it.
and because I know there's going to be some hard things about it, but you get it passed early enough so voters are happy with it, and then later you have to pay the price.
Hopefully 5 years they forget about it.
Do you think that'll actually pass through? It doesn't have to pass through.
Yeah, for a national law, that's,
So, like, it could
federal minimum wage should be 15.
Do you think?
Because that Biden said he was going to do that.
It'd be a hard
Oh,
thing.
boy.
The
Biden said
Senate,
in the debate, he was like,
right, the Senate would have to go by, and they probably wouldn't, right?
Short term, I'll probably be happy. I don't know about long
I tell you what, Hunter and Ellie, let's write down the second thing here for supply side, then I'll get to you, okay? And this gets to the problem. Sarah, you were asking, what's the problem? Like, this is doing really well. George H.W. Bush actually saw some benefits from this. Even Bill Clinton saw some benefits from this. It's about timing. Can you guys think of any problems of this supply side, Lucas, where you focus on the supply, the products, you don't focus on the consumers? What are some potential problems with the supply side economic model? Let's go, Sam.
Could it get out of balance a little bit?
Yeah, you're on something. You get out of balance, Ellie.
So if the producers are like able to keep on producing and they get like less taxes, but the people that actually are poor, it's going to be harder for them to start up these businesses without the funds and without.
Yeah. So, have you guys ever heard of stories where producers, the richest of the rich, right? We're not talking like upper middle class, where they have a ton of money and they just more or less sit on it. They sit on it. They might invest it here and there, but they're not really investing in other companies or helping other people start up. So where they're just You ever hear the term of like sitting on their mattress, like underneath their mattress there's gobs and gobs of money.
Stimulate the economy.
They're not stimulating the economy. They're like, the problem, Ellie, is like, okay, here's tax cuts, great. And then they just sit on it. And because we're not communist, our country can't force the producer to create new branches. Do you see that? So it's about unbalance. It's about, and let's write this down for the second thing. The big problem with this is there is a possibility, the big problem with this is there's a possibility that producers will just sit on the money. The big problem with this is the possibility that producers will just sit on the money and not create jobs. They'll just sit on the money and not create jobs. And think of it, Paige, that like imagery of the Monopoly guy, right? Like sitting on a mattress where all like the money's underneath his mattress because he's not putting it in a bank. He's not creating, he's so scared he's just sitting on it. You can call him selfish, you can call him just conservative, they're just not doing anything with it. That's the problem. When people earn enough money that they're like, I'm good, and they don't like stimulate it, supply side economics has its faults. And that's where the term, the pejorative term, sort of the negative term of trickle down economics, it's like all the wealth, the oasis is up here, but Nicole, it like barely drips down to those who need it most. This is where supply side economics got in a problem. Our system is built on capitalism, and I don't, I'm afraid like Sarah's dad's going to burst through the wall like the Kool-Aid man and be like, you're wrong, you're totally oversimplifying this. But I'm going to simplify it.
Sarah's dad, the Kool-Aid man.
Hey. Okay, all right, so here is in essence what the 80s looked like, right? Like good, stable, steady growth. Producers have more money, they expand. Recessions are intended to happen within capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing wrong with recessions. The problem is you want over time this to be your economic model in the realm of capitalism. There's times that you go down, right? Where it's just cyclical. Think of the housing bubble. All of you could be investing heavily in housing like it was until 2008, and then the bubble bursts. You lend out, Spencer, too much money to people who can't afford it, and that bursts. People get laid off, furloughed, they lose jobs. COVID, just life happens, that's what happens. It's during this time. During this time, Reagan policy advisors are saying, just keep going. That's not going to help those who have been laid off, right? So their model is to say, during this time, you should shift to this next one that we're going to get to tomorrow, Keynesian economics. This is the time a good economist will say, let's go with Keynesian economics in this window to help not the producers out, but the consumers. But the demanders. Yeah, the demanders. Okay, but guys, remember, recession's supposed to happen. You guys have only seen one recession in your lifetime, and that was what we would call the Great Recession. That was horrible. You're supposed to have a recession like every 10 years or so. 2008 was when it started. It went until about 2013. Sarah, I will say this. Some said that President Obama during this time, he was letting too much focus on consumers happen with this recent recession, and they should have gone quicker to producers so that they had more opportunities to create jobs.
So they just need to find the balance, like find frame of like yep.
In fact, that's where your dad will say, that's what makes economics hard is you have work. Unlike politics.
Not one thing works every
Not
time.
exactly. That's the economic model. Not one thing works every time. You have to
I think honestly we the president that sounds I feel like neither of the presidents.
and unfortunately in politics, both sides get trends like this is the only way and this is the only way. And it's like economics,
it needs to be like both ways.
Yeah, you have to. So yeah, that's. Does that make sense about how it failed? Right? Yeah. Here.
Have you seen Snowden?
I haven't. I know the movie, right? Joseph Gordon-Levitt, right?
Ed Snowden.
Yeah, I mean, like, but he portrayed it.
And everything, and then that's been awesome. It's on Netflix. Watch it. It's called Snowden.
Okay. I did see it. I haven't seen it.
It's good. It's good. Watch it.
Thanks, man. Oh, Nicole, yeah.
See ya.
Sweet. I will update this ASAP. So,
I have questions with the assignment.
mock trial one?
Yeah. Can I just talk to you after school? It's like,
Yeah, I'll be here, yeah, let's have.
it'll just be fast.
Yeah, you're fine, I know you're mentioning you want to do that too. Yeah.
The note that we turn in.
Do I keep the notes? I do not. Are you looking at them to use for something else? Is that what you're
For
looking at?
art, he said if we can show that we have creative art, then I was just gonna turn the notes because we didn't have time to do it new ones.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, you did have some good works of art.
I
You
would.
did.
I worked on those
So
hard.
this is, I don't know part two, so.
We'll take something better than nothing.
Yeah, I had it. Don't worry too much.
Okay.
We're finishing up our last unit.
I will.
Oh man.
You raised some really good. You raised some really good points.
Like, okay, bring it apart, right? Mentally bring it. And I'm like, you know what? Basketball season. I can make it.
that's
No,
a good point.
done. Like mentally now, like great.
That's a
Done.
very good point.
Yes. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
do. In fact, I was telling third hour this, and second hour, I was saying, thinking when we were watching the election results on Thursday, I was getting so stressed out just watching it, but I thought, your generation Z, has sometimes been dinged for being like snowflakes and fragile. This year has been horrible on so many levels. It's proven to me that you guys have earned your medal. Like, obviously there's knuckleheads, but in general, whereas my generation had like 9/11, and then we had like JFK's assassination, and you had like the Great Depression, like people had to go through stress. This is legitimate. This ain't snowflakey stuff. This just sucks.
like,
Wasn't snowflakes for millennial stuff?
Yeah, but it's compared to Gen X. Gen X will say Gen Y and Gen Z are
Millennials are like in their 30s now.
but like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the point that like, I don't think people get. And like, like Big Swinton, it's really hard for him to make those. Or like any principal who actually knows his students is gonna have a harder time with those decisions than a principal push or governor. Because he doesn't know the students.
Totally
And so
true.
now for him to get that decision when he doesn't know the students, he doesn't know the principals, he doesn't get it. Like, he doesn't. He's not an educator. So
Yeah.
why should he be the one?